So, Judge Hidalgo, you released a statement earlier this morning about the storms that moved through Harris County. And from what I understand, there are still about 56,000 people and homes without power. Can you give us an update about that?
So we were on the phone with our Office of Emergency Management this morning alongside, of course, Jeff Lindner, meteorologist, and a representative from Centerpoint. And they were explaining they're working around the clock. They've brought additional crews, Centerpoint has, to restore power to those clients that are without power, those customers. What he explained is each individual meter could be a meter for an entire facility, right? Doesn't mean it's just a home. And so they, as always, they prioritize hospitals, et cetera, but there's no reports of anything major. So, if there's a really problematic downed line that really affects a lot of different units, then it'll take a little bit longer. But the sense was this will be fine by the end of today.
It's so hard to prepare, isn't it? I mean, what do you do to get ready for something like that? And I'll tell you, looking at models, it looks like Wednesday afternoon, another round of this is on the way.
Yes, and we don't know exactly what's going to happen. I will say Jeff Lindner was explaining to us that because of a drop in humidity right now, and you understand this better than I do, that it's not going to be as bad. It's going to kind of calm down for a bit, and whatever's coming on Wednesday is not going to be as widespread. Does that mean we will not have outages? No. And so to answer your question, what do you do to prepare? It's hurricane season either way. We live in Houston, Harris County. We all know what we've been through. And so, what I've finally done is just have at home, have your kit ready for a power outage, for having to be at home for a few days. Just have that year round.
No,
And just jump in on the tag on that. Online, you guys have all the information, what you should have in your kit. Where do people go?
It's readyharris.org.
Okay. Thank you, Celeste.
Are you concerned at all the fact that we're really not in the peak season yet? And yes, we can be prepared, but as Houstonians and people that live in the area, I mean, this was pretty mild, and it seems like to have that amount of, power outages already. What are y'all doing besides, having a kit? Are y'all having conversations before the season?
One piece is how quickly can we recover from outages. So having those consistent conversations with Centerpoint and really that pressure and holding them accountable. We work very well with them, but that doesn't mean that we don't need to hold them accountable. So this is one of those instances, seeing them, be quick in the response, be responsive to any reports of vital facilities. And as far as hurricane season, we move full speed ahead with the flood control projects that we have. Obviously, the city needs to do its work on the drains as well. We have the bayous and the channels. And then we're also just going through our exercises at this point. We're very well practiced. My concern, of course, is with this severe cuts that are coming from the Trump administration. What is that going to mean in terms of disaster recovery and in terms of these forecasts? And, I see a bit of a parallel. It's ironic between what's the indiscriminate cutting there and what's happening at the local level in terms of saying we're going to cut all this money and we're not really sure where from. I never thought that we would be following Trump administration fiscal irresponsibility strategies.
I know we want to jump into the funding and all of that in a second, but I just want to go back to something you just said to help clarify for those listening. Are you saying that more emphasis is put on recovery because we live in this area and we should expect these outages, or are you putting more focus on prevention so we don't have the outages to begin with?
Both, right? I mean, Centerpoint we have followed up on them doing more work in terms of trimming tree limbs so that they don't fall on key infrastructure that they need. They have the generators, the ability to bring additional personnel. Of course, that's more on the recovery side. In terms of flooding, the prevention side are the flood control projects, and then the recovery side, that's where the federal administration comes in terms of FEMA. Last year, we had 3 federally declared disasters, and that meant FEMA could come in and provide very significant financial support to families to help them bridge, when the insurance kicks in or if they don't have home insurance, and then, of course, or flood insurance. And then, for Frank, the models from the National Weather Service, that's a prevention challenge.
Well, and to your point, we had 3 different problems last year. Emergencies, and it's like Thanksgiving dinner. Every person is different, and every storm is different. You can have a derecho, you can have a Beryl, you can have an Ike, you can have a Harvey, you can have a snowstorm that we covered.
That's right.
I mean, they're all different. So you can only do what you can do to prepare. I think the recovery is really where the rubber meets the road. And you look at what has happened with Helene and the recovery in North Carolina, and they've just been told by the Trump administration, sorry. How do you? What are you going to do when that happens?
I have to hope that our Republican leadership in Houston, Harris County will stand up and advocate for their own constituents. That has not necessarily been the case at the state level, right? When the state has attacked their constituents in Harris County. But I think that in terms of disaster response, the president may be immune to all kinds of criticism and scandal for whatever reason, but I don't think that makes individual Republican members of Congress immune.
Well, and to your point, North Carolina is a very Republican state, and that's where all of the Helene damage occurred, and that's the state that has been told sorry. So it's going to be a tough road to hoe.
Yeah, and we'll see what the fallout is from that. I think, what can I do? Right now, let's not get ahead of ourselves, right? We worked with the Trump administration during COVID, and of course, we had very serious differences in messaging, but they helped provide resources. We had a direct line of communication, and so my hope is that were that to happen, that we could advocate for the community, work in partnership, and get things done. Does this recovery from Helene bode well for Harris County? Not necessarily, but everything is different. Again, I would like to see the fallout on the local leadership from what's happening.
We're speaking with Harris County Judge Lina Hidalgo, and we're taking your calls at 713-440-8870. On the line, we have Ronnie from Pasadena. Ronnie, what's up?
Hi, I've got a question for the judge. With the Texas government on the verge of outlawing all THC products, is there anything that the city of Houston can do on behalf of business owners who are going to have to close shop, or those of us that use medical marijuana? Not medical marijuana, but you know what I mean, use marijuana for medical reasons?
I guess you mean the Harris County, not the city of Houston. So, Judge, if you can address
that's what I meant.
Yeah,
Correct.
Thank you, Ron.
Thank you, Ronnie. No, good question. We're certainly monitoring the legislature and everything that's coming down from that. I think that Ernie sort of hit on something with his question is that generally Harris County does not have ordinance making authority, but either way, I'll tell you, whenever we have tried to sort of find our way in around these state government mandates, generally what happens is we end up in court, and of course the Republican judges at the state level are very much incentivized to rule for the state, irrespective of whether they have a strong case or not, because we've seen in the past Attorney General Paxton come after judges that do not support him with great success. And so, I think it's more important right now to see what comes out of there, and then to the extent that there can be work done with legislators on the margins to protect communities that need this, that's probably the work that needs to be done.
Thank you for your call. Remember, if you have a question for the judge, 713-440-8870. I'd like to move you over to law enforcement, and there's a lot of talk about the county looking for law enforcement pay parity. Can you shed some light on what the plan is for Harris County and where the funding comes from for it?
Right. And so that's the concern, is there is no plan, right? We are committing to cuts without saying how we're going to do this. And so the concern is the following. The primary concern is, of course, we need to be able to recruit and retain not just law enforcement officers, but great law enforcement officers. That is a priority for any community. I mean, it's a no-brainer. And so, great, we agree on that. The question is, how are you going to pay for that? Because it costs money and it's a recurring cost. You're going to have those spots ongoing for the future. And so, the issue, of course, is the county is already facing around $130 million deficit. And then on top of that, you're adding another $130 million cost for these races. So we're facing a $270 million deficit in this coming fiscal year, which, we talk about, throw numbers around, kind of normalize it, but it's not normal. I don't know that this has ever happened. It's certainly not the county that I inherited and have been presiding over. And sometimes you have to call people out, whether they're in your party or not. And this is one where I'm going to say we had opportunities the past couple of years, last year in particular. We saw this train wreck coming. We saw the need for more pay. We had an opportunity to ask the community whether they would fund this pay, and I could not get a third vote to put that on the ballot and just ask, look, here's the issue. Would you be willing to go to this tax rate, still lower tax rate than it was ever under my predecessor? And so right now my concern is, okay, fine. Let's say we're going to do everything we can to provide these raises, but let's be transparent as to how, because I'll tell you, and I would like to talk about this if I have a chance in a minute, what the city is saying is itself extremely vague, and I'm afraid there's a little bit of wool over our eyes on both ends, just talking about things that sound real good without getting into the details.
But no matter how good it sounds or doesn't sound, you're faced with then having law enforcement who may shift over to the city, may go elsewhere. What do you do to retain? And I guess you do have to face the idea of raises there. How would you fund it?
So for me, I would first sit down and look at everything that's there and see what amount of cuts we can make. We have already done the efficiency studies. We did that before. We have worked to really modernize a county that didn't even have a county administrator. That doesn't mean that there is no fat left to cut. And so that's why we're requesting departments to cut their operations by a certain percentage. But so let's just see what's there, what we need to tweak, and then see how much there is left to fund. And I would go to the voters with that. I would say, look, would you be willing to pay for this and an increase in the tax rate? And if not, then we'll just slash services by that much. I don't like having to do that right now when our back's against the wall, when we could have dealt with this in 2022, or we could have dealt with this last year. It is not a surprise. You don't just wake up one day with a $270 million deficit.
Do you have any say over, you mentioned tax rate. You could keep the tax rate the same and just increase all of the assessments of the properties. And so the $350,000 house is now assessed at $425,000, so that the tax rate effectively goes up without raising the tax rate, right? Just because the assessment goes up.
Yeah, and that's what was done before I took office, right? So everyone's up in arms about the taxes and the tax rate. And really what we've done is cut, and by everyone I mean my detractors, right, is we have cut the tax rate every year I've been in office. It's been lower than it was under my predecessor. What they used to do before I took office is the tax rate, as you said, would remain the same, but the value of the homes, they'd be valued higher, or the properties, and therefore more taxes would be collected. And so that's how the previous administration or administrations could say we are not increasing taxes. Now, we are not the ones in charge of those appraisals, which I think was your question. So I can't, there's a board that is in charge of that, independent of us. But what people have to remember is, I know that the tax bills, property taxes, are extremely high. But why are they extremely high? The bulk of the property tax bill is the public schools, because the state reduced its commitment to education several years ago. So if they used to pay, a high amount for education, they dropped it way down, and now they're upping it a little bit. But ultimately what's happening is the school districts are having to collect property taxes just for basic functions that the state used to help them cover. And so that's why I think the best thing to do is, rather than mandate, we're going to decide to put the tax rate here, which again, what I proposed last year was lower, right? But that doesn't mean the bill is lower. So how about we ask the voters? And that was my request last year.
You're listening to Hello Houston, and we are taking your calls now for Harris County Judge Lina Hidalgo. Louise from Southwest Houston is on the line now with a question for Judge Hidalgo. Louise, welcome to Hello Houston.
Yes, hi, thank you. Two questions. One, how does somebody attend, is it called the county commission meetings? And how does somebody submit issues to them or questions? That's the first thing. Or commissioner's court, maybe that's what it's called. Mm-hmm. But the other one is on the topic of the property taxes. You just mentioned, Lina, that the board that is independent of the county that determines the appraisals. And the problem is that people are getting pushed out of their houses, and we have a severe shortage of moderate housing in Houston. So if they keep increasing the appraisals, obviously the taxes go up, even though the percentage might be the same. Right. How do we solve that problem? Who is on that board, and how do they get chosen? So two topics there.
Thank you. Thank you for those questions. So to answer your first question, you go to Harriscountytx.gov. Our meetings take place on Thursdays at 10 a.m., and we generally begin with public speakers, and they take place every few weeks. So you'll see the calendar, and you can get information there about how to sign up to speak. Come by. It's in the first floor. We have a larger courtroom right now that comfortably accommodates all the folks that come to speak. As to the appraisal district, so because of a change in state law, the members of the appraisal district are now elected, or a majority of them are now elected. So that election took place, I want to say a few months ago. At this point, I think after COVID, all of us have our sense of time a little warped, but it's relatively recent. So we could vote for those folks. It's one of those things that, went really under the radar. And so I don't know that there's going to be really significant change there. I think that the key, to your point, in terms of the availability of housing is then, okay, we need more affordable housing. And there was, I want to say, a Kinder study done a couple years ago about how much more housing is necessary in Houston, Harris County for us to be able to accommodate the growth to where somebody can afford a home. It's not a giveaway. It's just if you work a job, normal salary to where you can actually afford it, and it's in the billions, right? And so that's where, and we're looking at cutting that. Well, we're working on that already with the city and with the county. So this is where it's all connected, and it's really important that everybody hold leaders accountable when we are pushing the can down the road and really limiting our budget options. So one of the things I want to add here, because what I've read about the city is as vague as what I'm reading about the county. And so I have a little bit more detail in terms of the city because there's a comptroller, right? Whereas we're still waiting to get our information. But for example, they're drawing down $100 million from the general fund in the city to paper over a deficit. It includes a 6% water rate increase. It includes over $17 million in vague savings with no explanations. It delays funding the city's future obligations. So pension and retiree healthcare obligations, that has been delayed again and again. So these are financial holes that are getting deeper that the city can't climb out of. And of course, what we know is the water bill is going to increase. We don't know by how much. And so it sounds real great, right? We're going to increase this, we're going to increase law enforcement, and we have quote unquote savings, but savings from where? And when you talk to the official who does the math, this is what you hear.
All right, I want to thank you, Louise, for that call. If you have a call or question for the judge, give us a call right now. We're speaking with Lina Hidalgo, Harris County Judge. Call us at 713-440-8870. I wanted to jump over to something that's also making an awful lot of headlines, and it's your trip to France. I guess the most recent update, if I'm staying up on my news, is that you had requested for some staff to be able to attend with you, and the Commissioner's Court is denying that.
Yeah, so it's a trade mission. It's the kind of thing that I figured it would become a political fight. I am wear the badge of honor that folks will come after me over things that they may not attack others over, because I call out things like this. And so it's a trade mission. There's a major conference there, technology, specifically AI, about 165,000 participants. We're coordinating with the Greater Houston Partnership, Rice University, the consulate there, government officials there. I mean, it's a very serious trade mission. And the idea, and I asked, this is not something that I came up with, it's something that they came to me with. And I said, why would we do a trade mission right now when the administration is saying, I don't want trade, right? And at the federal level. And the answer, I thought, was very wise, and it was, we need to make sure that we as a region are communicating our message, which is, come and invest here. And so we're having business leaders from various industries, as well as cultural philanthropy, go and speak with counterparts. And that's really how these deals are made, as you put people in a room, and then you have opportunities for exchange, and eventually, ideally, there are additional investments in our region, which means additional revenue, which means additional ability to cover services. So it's totally fine. My budget is very small compared to that of my colleagues. It's about $10 million, including the Office of Emergency Management. Theirs, if you include the toll road money, about $70 million. And so I just said, can I use some of my travel budget, which is already budgeted, to send some staff to the trade mission with me, because I can't possibly manage all of this on my own. And the answer was no, which is just bizarre, because each office really, there's not a precedent for the court saying to another member of Commissioner's Court, you can't use your budget for what you say you want to use it for.
In the past judges, when they've gone on similar trips, has their staff been able to go, and have they been funded?
I don't know. And I know in the past, for example, is the question about security detail. Well, how come your predecessor didn't have a security detail and you do? Well, look, I've received many threats. I'm more visible. I don't know that they participated in this or not, but the way these trade missions work is, you bring staff. We had requested per my security detail that information not be shared about where I was going until I returned, but of course that was leaked. And then even at our Commissioner's Court meeting, some of the folks that are, that will sort of chase after me and harass me and whatnot said, folks from that group said, okay, we'll see you in Paris, right? So, I can say, look, I'm gonna pay for it out of my campaign funding, which is, what I could do. The problem is my staff would then have to take vacation time and not be paid for their work. So, it's just a game. I'd rather, focus on the budget and these big issues. I think it's a little bit, attempts at bullying, but at this point I have pretty thick skin, and I saw it coming. And so, unfortunately my staff's a little frustrated, but I told them from the start, I was like, you guys, they're just going to make a whole thing of it. It's okay. We're going to be okay.
Judge Hidalgo, do you feel like you're held to a different standard than other counterparts and previous judges?
Yeah, I mean, that's obvious. But again, it's because of what we've achieved. We got so much done with, even despite responding to all these emergencies that Frank was referencing earlier, from the floods, the fires, the derecho, COVID, of course. And as you know, my election flipped the makeup of the political makeup of the Commissioner's Court for the first time in 30 years. People see that I have a future, and what's surprising to me is the attacks from fellow Democrats. But I think there's this fear. This is my theory, right? I'm not in their heads, but I think there's this fear of again, political repercussions. But if I've learned anything is if you're true to yourself, to what's right, you can win. We won re-election and it was just fine, and you don't need to sink the whole budget in order to do that.
And to your point about security, you've been in place almost 10 years now.
This is my 7th year. Yeah.
7th year. But the world has changed a lot in just 7 years.
But Judge Hidalgo, I want to go back to something that you said. You said it's obvious. Why is it so obvious to you?
I mean, I think people can see that, right? Just basically anything I do. I remember one time we had an exchange with a colleague about this was, I guess, 2019 or anyway, before when Commissioner Ramsey wasn't there yet, and one of the commissioners slammed his hand on the table, and then I have a colleague that just won't look at me, and another one that's a cuss in a church, but nobody's reading any of that in the news, right? But look, it's fine. I think it's part of being able to make a difference. I know I'm having an impact, and at this point, with my experience and of course my diagnosis and treatment for anxiety and depression, I'm at a point where and then, of course, the false prosecution of my staff members. It's like, what's a worse thing that could possibly happen to you in politics is, to be afraid of being jailed for something you didn't do, right? I mean, it was just terrifying. At this point, this stuff is like really small potatoes.
Which I would imagine people from other cities, when they look at Harris County, they see Harris County as a very Democrat. People think of Houston as very progressive, and that there would be a lot of support behind you. So what do you say when people look at us and from other cities that might be listening to this and might be actually quite surprised that this is the type of treatment you've received?
Yeah, I mean, we see it with prevalent leaders anywhere. I think the political prosecution speaks to the pretty unlimited power, unchecked, certainly, power of prosecutors around the country. I think at the federal level, generally, we know that there were checks against this that now the Trump administration is trying to get rid of. So I think that's why we haven't seen political prosecutions of members of Congress and such until now. And as far as us being a Democratic region or not, I mean, it's been hard fought. We've been able to win it by a lot some years. Obviously, the Republican Party still believes that they can win it back. I think that's certainly a possibility. But I don't think that I think, I have a very strong standing among the Democratic Party, certainly more centrist Republicans. I'm very pragmatic, but certainly they've been very successful. $25 million campaign in my reelection, a real strong focus on criticizing me. They've been rather successful at framing me as sort of a out-of-touch leftist. When if you look at the policies, I mean, I'm the one advocating for a balanced budget, right? And this has been, I was able to maintain that until my Republican colleague, two of them were the ones that boycotted the budget and limited law enforcement funding 2022. And then, there's 3 of my colleagues this past year that wouldn't allow us to keep a balanced budget. So, but that's politics. I mean, that is just politics. And I'm not going to say like I love it, but I don't not enjoy it, like I love that I know how to deal with it, and I have those skills now, and I can just go home and play with my cat and live my best life.
There is a question on YouTube. And speaking of anxiety, Alex Garza says, hi, Judge. How do you counter Texas anti-LGBTQ plus laws while advancing inclusive policies to ensure Harris County remains a safe, equitable place for the LGBTQ plus community? June is Pride Month. Take it away.
Yeah, thank you. No, June is Pride Month. It's exciting. Some people say, the Pride Parade's a parade. What's that for? And I think step number one, of course, is just being very vocal about tolerance in our region, and really no matter what the group is, but particularly those groups that are coming under attack, like the LGBT community. So you'll continue to see us do that. I've heard from county employees that just us being able to talk about it, to have a Pride Month resolution, for example, that makes them feel more comfortable and is changing the culture at the county worker level. So I'm hoping that helps also countywide, but policy-wise as well. We established a 12-week paid family leave for both parents in the case of a birth of a child. That applies, of course, for same-sex couples or otherwise. We have other policies, including an advisory board that helps us come up with county policies around that. You can be sure we're not scrubbing our websites or our programs based on that. Better not talk about it too much before they try to legislate against us. So look, we are always very creative. We have a very creative staff, county attorney. I can promise you we'll do everything we can in terms of specific attacks, and we're not people are going to shy away from a fight with the state.
Judge, thank you for coming in.